That's on the Be Real.
But welcome back. This is episode 5, I think.
Can you believe it?
I know, it's weird. Of our Eclipsing the Shadow as we work through our intentional shadow work through Christine Jetty's book, Tarot Shadow Work. I am Salann, one half of the two Pondering Pagans.
Rook, the other half,
The lesser half of the two Pondering Pagans.
the greater half.
That's funny. And so we're going to talk a little bit about where we're at now in the Tarot Shadow Work. So we will roll our intro. So we are going to talk today about kind of anything that's happened up into our preparation, right? Into then the first pull. We're not going to go into details, I don't think, about the first pull itself, but we'll talk a little bit about the actual spread and kind of what it means and some of the meditations and things that we've done up to this point. And I think we'll share a little bit of our thoughts and stuff on what we've actually done and learned, I think, about ourselves, but not go into the actual cards because I think that's going to need its own space.
Yeah, maybe we'll probably talk about what each position is in the spread. So,
Yeah. So we're
yeah,
in chapter 3, which is the darkest hour. And the really fun part about this to me is when you talk about all of it, her very first sentence is what I think is one of the most often skipped steps. The first one really is preparation, but this one is discovery. So discovery, I think, is one of the things we miss a lot.
as the detached observer, I really like that. Without judgment. You're not trying to change anything at the stage of discovery. You're just observing.
Yep. No blame attaching. Just, it's almost like when you think about the meditations when you're trying to learn to meditate, right? Or even when you're really good at it, you still have those issues sometimes where things come into your mind. And then you're supposed to, you let it come in and you just kind of broom sweep it off a little bit because it's not going to affect or change you. That's what we're doing, I think, with discovery is let's observe it. Let's see what it is. And I have observed a lot so far.
And this has really helped me leading up to this because before I could not freaking meditate. My like stuff would come in my mind. I would get anxious, I would get upset, and through this process I've learned kind of like what you said, let the thoughts come in and let them go out. Like when the dogs bark or jump up in your lap when we're doing the meditation, I've been able to improve my focus, which is awesome.
And I don't know if it's the same for you, but one thing that's different, and I've said this a bunch of times because I find it important to remind people that I've done shadow work before intentionally, and the reason I say that is because I want to show that it doesn't matter how experienced you might feel, doing different processes from different people are huge. Like I have learned something so different with this shadow work, and it's the layering of things, right? So what I mean is, like when we first started this, I was like, oh, there's something in my shadow about X, Y, and Z, and then I'm finding, oh wait, that X, Y, Z is really A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z, and then we do a meditation, and it's just we've done the actual first pull, so it's kind of hard to separate that out. But now I'm seeing a whole new layer of my actions because we're paying attention to it. Some of the actions that have occurred in my life recently with stressful situations have actually allowed me to look at them completely different afterwards. Like it's a whole different aspect of something I didn't consider, and it's layered. It started as, oh, I get angry sometimes, or oh, this frustrates me, or oh, I feel this about myself. I'm like, I have abandonment issues, right? Almost, who doesn't? But the situations that have happened after shadow work have started coming back up. Whew. It's been it has been different. It has layered so much heavier but comfortable, not even stressful. Like I acted the way I would have always acted in a stressful situation to that level, and I think I was okay to do that. I had a very massive meltdown, and I think I was okay to do that with the situation What's different is I'm looking back on it and seeing why was that so hurtful to me, or to feel the way that I felt during that. And we're going to talk about that, I think, a little bit.
And, to absolutely, and to talk about preparation, you know what? It's 41 pages till you even get into pulling a card in
Mm-hmm.
this book. It's a lot of preparation. And through this process, one thing that's neat to me is it's still like a little bit, oh my God, to say some of these things out loud that
Mm-hmm.
you're discovering. But it's like a quick, oh my gosh, you really don't want to say it, but you can say it and journal about it and
Mm-hmm.
not feel the shame from it. That was the biggest thing I learned, to say it and be like, oh, like maybe a little cringe, but to not feel shameful.
Yeah. Or even the communication with us, things that I would normally say that, is just not an issue, and it isn't. And I can say it without feeling like I'm trying to be judgmental. It's like, hey, this is X, Y, and Z, and it made me feel X, Y, Z. This is going to have to
Yeah.
be discussed. And without the judgment part of it, that's what I've been finding is really different. And I think as we talk about the first tarot card spread, which is the the star of discovery.
There's some
um,
scars.
yeah, so I mean, we've done our initial pools. We're not talking about that tonight. That's next episode. But the meditation and all the things that led up to that have actually done a lot of shadow work. So I've felt a very big impact, and so I kind of want to get into that whole tarot shadow work. Like, let's talk about the what's driving it. So the next section really is the purpose of fear and what your shadow knows. So what are your thoughts on that piece of it?
Well, I really like, and it's true, about the purpose of fear. And she talked about this, I think, in the very first chapter, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But um, is that fears drive what we need, to survive, and that we're driven or taught at a young age a fear of loss. Not enough money, a relationship doesn't work out,
Mm-hmm.
whatever the case, and that motivates us to go. But when you start that negative thinking, I know for me that comes up a lot. You're never going to have enough money. I mean, unless you're, even if you're a billionaire, or whatever, you're always going to want more. There's nothing that's an endless supply, and that negative thinking from that we're taught from a young age, the fear of loss, don't it kind of has you focusing on what you don't have instead of being grateful for what you do have. And that's kind of what I got out of the fear section, and what fear's purpose is.
Yeah, I think for me personally, I've always known and worked through the abandonment part of fear, the fear of being alone, the fear of being left behind, the fear of not engaging, the fear of losing. But also, what I've learned recently through this shadow work is the fear of myself actually letting go of other things, which is
Hmm.
also part of that abandonment trauma, right? I have an anxiety and a what our friend would call a vagal response, right? And I'm not the master of this yet, but I am certainly reading it, and it's giving me some insight. But my body has a response to letting go of things because I fear what those things are, and that fear is what has motivated me to hang on to things that are not valuable to me, and not be able to say I don't need that. Prime example of fear. A year ago, if we sit down to do an episode, right, I would almost do anything I could to force it to happen, even if I didn't like it. A couple of days ago, we sat down to do this episode, and we learned really quickly that it wasn't the right time. We weren't feeling it, and we just stopped it, and it was okay. Being able to let it go and let things go doesn't indicate failure, and that is a huge part of what I'm learning so far in my shadow, is that being setting that edge or that boundary so that you can self-reduce your own fears and anxieties is okay. It's not failure. It's allowable. And she talks about how it's your choice how you will perceive an event in your life. And it's not saying that it's right or wrong, because if you have an event, and this is exactly in line with polyvagal theory, which is the theory that I'm kind of reading, which is an actual therapy type, right? It's like cognitive-based therapy is one thing, Fear, desensitization is one, and so all different kind of theory. Polyvagal is one, and it specifically speaks to that. And I think we even talk about this probably in nursing. Pain is what the patient perceives it to be. Well, fear and trauma is the same way. It's what we assign to it in our lives that matters, not what other people think it should and shouldn't matter. So what's traumatic to you isn't traumatic to me, and vice versa necessarily. And I think that's also an important learning piece for me, because I think we've talked, like, I think I've had some pretty significant traumas in my life. I think we all have. I also think that I've dealt with them extremely well, but I also think that that has prevented me from dealing with them fully. So when we talk about fear and anxiety and all of those things that are kind of latched in to how we react now to things, it's very eye-opening to kind of see, is like, okay, I perceive it this way, and that's what we've got to address. It's not how you think I perceive it or what you think I should perceive it as. It's how I perceive it. And I'm not going to judge myself for thinking that that is wrong. Like, why am I so nervous when people ask me to talk about myself? I can talk in front of anybody for anything, but if you ask me just to say my name and how many years you are with the company, I am palpitations, sweating, I'm uncomfortable, I don't feel good, I'm just like, I want out so bad. It's incredible anxiety. Yet if you don't ask me my name, I can start right off and rattle off a 2-hour conversation about nursing or leadership or whatever the case is. What is it about it that when we're going on a round table to talk about myself? So that seems silly to me, and probably silly to a lot of people, right? Because whatever I've attached to that, which I have not figured out yet, is part of the trauma and the perception that I've got to be aware of and figure out. But I'm not going to be ashamed of that just because other people might think I should be, or it's silly. But that's what I kind of got out of the fear. So what the shadow knows is it knows those connections. They're in my unconscious. I haven't figured them out yet, and I need to bring them up so that I can actually make them into something and utilize them and work through them.
Yeah, and then too, the part, like, oh God, looking back on things and that we've done or said and or been through experiences, and the biggest part about this whole process for me, which I've kind of gotten better at, is if you have a memory, whether it's a trauma, a stress, maybe it's something you just like regret that you did, like, I shouldn't have said that. You can look at it or think about it and process it without being fear. I mean, it's in the past. It's the people that were involved half the time probably don't even remember what you did, said, or otherwise, or maybe they do, and that's your thing to process. But I hate that too. And I don't know if I'm like you, I can talk to anybody, anywhere, instantly. But when you're sitting in a conference room or a setting like that, and they ask you your name, how long you've been with the company, what building you're at, it's horrifying. And I don't know why that is either. It's like, I think one, because everybody's tuned into you and exactly what you're saying for that moment. But why is it not about other stuff? That's something interesting that maybe we can look at.
Yeah, and I think what really is interesting to me about it is, like I said, I can talk about I can even talk about myself. If you don't tell me, like, don't go around the room. I've assigned something to that process of where I freeze. And it's the same with like ritual stuff that we do. When there's a lot of people around, I have a moment of freeze before I am actually comfortable speaking or saying it, because maybe I feel like I'm going to look stupid or silly. Yet I can go on and on about anything else in groups and have these conversations that really, really work. And so it's interesting. It just is. It's just interesting. And so, I think that the thing is to know is that part of you is part of you, and you're going to need to uncover and work through that. I would like to know what's associated with that. And it almost, another thing that came up alongside what I'm reading in the polyvagal theory also came up in one of the Bialik breakdowns by Mayim Bialik episodes that I listened to the other day. And it really speaks to, this stuff that's in your unconscious that you're bringing out and you're working through and you're utilizing it to do stuff. The information that's planted in there is not you. It's not your thoughts of yourself. So it's not self-deprecating. Somebody else's thoughts of you that you've built into your system or your process. Because in the end, it shouldn't matter, but it does. So find it interesting when it comes to that fear part. So, but the other thing that was really cool, I think, as we talked about, is the meditation on tarot. Now, we've talked about meditation. We've talked about grounding and centering. We've even done a couple of videos, which were fun. But meditating with a card, kind of, how do you do that, or how would you work with that?
Well, and now I can't think of any better way for me to have started shadow work than this tarot method, whether it's a different one or this one. You know, I think it's successful that the best way to get the meaning in the card is to sit with it and to meditate with it and imagine kind of you as the person or involved in the card. Um, and in doing that, looking at the imagery and kind of just what do those thoughts bring immediately to your mind about what that card means.
Mm-hmm.
Not memorizing. I mean, she stresses that over in the book, and I get that now. I remember for a couple of years, I was like, "Oh my God, I have to read this book and memorize all these things," and it just doesn't work as well as if you look at the picture. Now, I do think it's important, and I want to learn some of the numerology and things like that. I think that'll make it stronger. But I'm meditating with the card and looking at the imagery, I think is really important.
I
And
agree.
it helps.
Yeah, and even with from the tarot read itself, the idea is, and this is goes kind of to dream analysis and symbolism analysis. There are some relatively standardized symbols that mean things like, a book might mean you need to learn. A rod or a scepter might mean you're royalty. I don't know, making stuff up. But when you really break down the symbols, they have to be interpreted through the person that's reading them. When it's dreams, right? So dream interpretation, there's people that call themselves dream interpreters. I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm just saying that it requires the ability to allow the person to help you to interpret them for you or with you, right? So if you dream about flying, that's a recurrent dream, and it can mean very similar things across people, but not always the case. It's the same with tarot. If I'm reading just the traditional meanings of tarot when I'm doing a tarot, I'm not getting anything from my connection to the card. I am getting just what somebody else said the card meant. It's becomes logical and less spiritual to me. So going in and really working with that card and kind of stepping through the card as part of your meditation, and what are they doing? How are they doing it? What's that action mean? What's that leg up? What does it mean and feel like if I'm in that card? And she talks about that, entering and leaving a tarot card, and that's kind of that part of the process. So I think
That's
that
a
is,
really cool,
yeah,
yeah.
very, very important. Um,
And so a
so,
couple things, right, about the work that we do. It's only the major arcana or the greatest secrets. Um, I like just a quick point about how this author interprets reverse cards, and that's just meaning to say that's a card you need to pay attention to. Like,
mhm.
hey, I'm different. Look at me, not the opposite of, not the negative or whatever. It's just like pay attention to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to also look at reading reversals in a regular deck. A lot of people take it as an immediate, oh, that's negative or that's a barrier, which is true. I use it as barrier quite often. But I think an even better description of it is, um, hey, pay extra attention to me. I'm a bigger problem, or I'm a bigger card, or I'm a bigger message than some of your others at the moment. So I did want to talk about real fast the reverse cards and the 8 to 11 difference. You talked about the reverse part, but the 8-11 difference is really depending on what tarot deck you have. There is strength and justice can sometimes be reversed, and a couple other cards too actually can be in different places. Doesn't matter to me. In tarot itself, they're going to come out the way they intend to come out in the universe anyway. So that I've never cared about that change or that difference. It's just is what it is, and it's pretty common to kind of be reversed. But for here, it doesn't matter for this either. They say that there's a lot of controversy between authors about where it belongs. Don't care at all. And I don't think Christine Jetty cared either, because again, the card that comes out that's going to give you the meaning is going to come out, and you're going to symbolize it the way you do. So I think we're on entering and leaving a tarot card, right?
Yes.
So one of the things for me, I'm going to turn my light up just a little bit because I feel a little washed out. There you go. I think one of the interesting things that she really mentions about entering and leaving it is that not only is it just a great way to meditate and use symbolism to kind of do things and grow with the tarot card and understand it, but once you remember or work through the tarot card and you have a feeling for it, every time you pull that card, you will have that feeling again, not just memorizing, what somebody says it should be, and, it's really about connecting to the artwork.
Yeah. And there's something about, I felt like when reading about it, I felt, oh God, I'm going to feel silly, but doing it, like looking at the card indirectly and letting it blur and then kind of, going into it, I didn't feel silly at all. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and one other thing that I think is really cool with the meditation or the exercise that she has with entering and leaving a tarot card is, when you're first looking at the card, you think about it, you process it, you look at the edges, you just kind of mull over the card. Then you let the edges of the card soften, and then you start looking in and seeing motion and all of these things that happen. And that really is a way to meditate on anything. That's how I meditate with flame, right? So I'm looking at a candle, I look at the flame, and then the flame becomes a little mushy. I don't know if I just said claim, but I meant flame. It becomes a little mushy and it just kind of softens around the edges, and I look kind of into it, and it's kind of the same idea, which I think is pretty cool. But there's a whole exercise for entering and leaving the tarot card. I don't know how much you may want to go into it, or if you want to share anything specific about it.
Yeah, so like you said, I think earlier, disconnect the phone, remove all distractions, breathe deep. And then, you are looking at it, let it grow bigger, look indirectly at it and let it kind of blur. And then as it gets larger, you can look at the people and the things in there, and they seem alive. And when you feel ready and relaxed, to literally step into it.
Yeah, literally.
Now, sorry.
That's an important part of shadow work. Dogs.
Yeah.
The part of the meditation that I find really interesting when it comes to entering and leaving the tarot card is also the whole, like, literally you feel yourself stepping into it, but also stepping out. Also affirmations. So affirmations are a great way to pull something into the front of your mind, even if you know it. You might feel silly saying, I am safe at all times, I can leave at any time. It's important to say it, because that actually brings it out into the physical world, like to the now, versus kind of something you just kind of know. And so I think those affirmations are an important part of that process. Is, look, if this gets uncomfortable, like if maybe you have a preconceived notion of the devil, and you're going to work with the devil card. That's in my my thing that we'll talk about when we do that part of it. Who wants to step into the devil card, and are you uncomfortable? You need to talk yourself, say, hey, I'm safe. I'm going to step into this devil card. I'm going to go meet the devil, and I'm going to work with the devil and see what happens as part of this tarot journey. And I think it's interesting that I will be using the guidance and saying it out loud and making the affirmation, because I want to make sure that's in the front of my mind. I'm not really afraid to do that, but I think it is interesting and important to do those things and say it out loud and make those affirmations. So yeah, I think that's really, really important.
Like that too, go when you're in there and taking everything in, and going up to the animals and the people and asking them questions, how'd you get here? What's going on? And then, thinking about how, if it's a person or an animal, what they can represent for your shadow. Because depending on the imagery, it's a message, and it represents something.
Yeah. Yep. And so then, really meditation. And if you're not doing shadow work and you're just watching this episode for whatever reason, good way to learn the tarot too. It doesn't have to be anybody's one way. So the next big thing that she really talks about is the tarot journal, which is different than the shadow journal. And I have to be honest, you can't see them, it's cut off here, but I mean, I have journals everywhere. I've got my Norse journal, I've got my tarot journal that I've had. I've got my crystals and rock journal, so I can meditate on those. I've got musings journal. I've got my shadow journal, which is right here. We'll look at in a minute. Journaling everywhere in different places, and these are separate from what I call our grimoire. They're more personal to me. The grimoire that we put together are the things that we've experienced and we do that we put together in a group work that we'll be sharing. So it's a little bit different in that aspect, but tarot journal can be part of your shadow journal, or like me, it can be separate, because actually I've had that way before I had my shadow journal, and we will probably continue our shadow and tarot journals long past the end of this shadow work intentional process that we're doing, because it's helpful. But yes, you can have a tarot journal that's separate. I do. I think many people probably do. In my tarot journal, what I do is I've gone through all the cards of a deck that I work with or that I really enjoy working with, and then I will put my reads in there. I will put different things in there, But you can kind of set it up however you want. If I do a read for a family member or a friend, I don't put that in that journal. But if I do a read for myself, I put it in my personal journal that I write my thoughts in, which is, again, separate from even those, which is, oh, wow, that's pretty bad. I have a problem. Maybe that's part of my shadow. Don't say it. It's not appropriate. I see you. What are your thoughts on a tarot journal? Do you need a separate one, or do you use whatever you have, or does it matter?
I think it's probably, for me, it's a good idea to have a separate one. But one thing you mentioned, because what I put in them typically, I haven't kept a tarot journal like I should, but is kind of just writing out what the read meant. But I think it's also awesome if you do a single pull, or just to look at the cards, and kind of like the exercise in the book, going into the card and writing about that card, because like you said, it can lock in the meaning and you don't need words or anything else.
Interesting.
Yeah,
interesting point.
Good to have separate ones, in my opinion.
I think that's a very interesting point. I think people are probably going to do different ways, of course, whatever works for you. I think an interesting thing that just popped into my mind about writing in a journal versus typing. For me, I've always been like, oh, I type really fast, so I like to type because I can get everything out that I'm thinking. But that kind of goes along with my current shadow work and issues that I'm having of letting go and or abandonment, right? I do have a fear of my thoughts abandoning me, which they do. They disappear in mid-sentence. So if I type, I can get it all out. But if I'm journaling and I'm handwriting, I slow down a lot. And my words become more intentional, and my words become more meaningful because I'm selecting them at a slower pace. And the meaning kind of comes through in a completely different manner. And so I find it very interesting. That was also on that podcast I was telling you about, where they were talking about anxiety is very helpful to journal, because when you handwrite your journal versus typing it, it forces your brain to slow down to keep up with what you're writing. So I think it's important to keep a handwritten journal of your own, because again, that slowness has been extremely beneficial for me, because as you can tell, I talk really fast, I think fast, I type fast, so that energy is always just kind of zooming around. But when I'm cognizant of it, and when I handwrite stuff, I'm thinking about it now, even my tone and my voice, I can slow it back down to a pace where my brain is able to really function more, not effectively, more in sync, I think is the word I'm looking for. And so I think having separate journals is a really big part of that, because what I write in my tarot journal is different than when I write in my personal journal, or my diary, I would almost call it, because it's, different thing, and it's different than what I'm going to write in my shadow. Sometimes they will cross over, and that's fine. I just like having lots of different things, around me. But I have found that typing, when it comes to journaling, is not it's not good for me. It makes me kind of write things more into a story, and then I feel detached from it versus when I handwrite and I have to think slowly to pick the right words because I can't stand striking out something. So
Oh, yeah,
I will,
like
yeah. Oh, handwrite just whiteout's even worse. Can't do it. So I have to slow down, and it's very helpful getting my brain to a pace that actually feels comfortable. Do you ever
I
have
think
any
it's
thoughts on
cool.
that, like the typing versus the writing?
Yeah, I actually do. So, first, real quick, I think it's good. It mentions that by journaling, about tarot or shadow, it helps you monitor your development or your journey, and it says always to date. But one thing I like to do is also write the time, date and time them. There is something about actually writing. Like to me, I don't think it would be good for me to type it out because there's something about when you write out by hand, it really lets you feel what you're writing to me. And it could be because, like you said, you have to go slower. It's almost like for me, because you're going slower, you're really thinking about each word, and in doing that, it really helps you to feel it and get more out of it. I think it probably a lot of people think, oh, who writes anymore? Well, probably half the people don't know how to write in cursive anymore.
Which I
I
love.
do,
Me too.
but it just there's something about the flow of handwriting and the way you actually feel it instead of just typing it out and you're like, okay, done. When you type, to me, it feels like a task, and when you write, it feels like journaling.
See,
Maybe
I
that makes sense.
that does, and not to belabor the point, but it reminds me too of like the tech witch perspective, which I'm not going to speak for anybody who calls themselves a tech witch, but then I also kind of am because that is the thing. Um, when you think about the exchange of energy, of what it takes to have the energy in your body to have the thought that you have in order to translate that thought into something that's cognitive and then write about your thoughts and feelings using physical energy to use the pen to write. Once you write it on that paper, it kind of becomes a solid for a minute. So it becomes a permanent thought. When you do it on the computer, you're using that energy, but the energy is still mechanical, and then it goes into a save spot where it has to be actively utilized and retrieved multiple times. So it's like you don't end the thought when you use energy working through electronic means, right? Because, yeah, it may be saved to a disk somewhere because you save it, but every time you turn your computer on, electricity goes back through it. And I know it sounds silly, but that extra energy, it kind of like symbolically keeps that thought moving as opposed to putting it down and then addressing it. And I don't know why it is or why I feel that way, but I do. I feel like what I put in our grimoire is alive and ever changing, even if the words don't change. It can be deleted and moved and utilized, but when it's that energy has been expended, it's like it's so much energy to get that thought onto something electronic versus when you're doing it by hand. It's a different energy transfer, and it feels different to me completely. So I find that very interesting. I would like to hear if anybody has any thoughts on that. Like, I think it'd be very neat. Do you feel like there's a difference between hand journaling and writing versus in the computer? Is it an energy thing? Is it a ease of use thing? Is it a speed thing? Because for me, for all intents and purposes, the handwriting is what that irritates me when people say intensive purposes.
That's why I was
Um,
laughing.
I know that's why I said it. But for all intents and purposes, the point is very, very specific. It is for me, is to get it out so that I can then reread it and address it and kind of see something later. But I want it to stay on that piece of paper. I don't know what it is. I don't want it floating through space, time continuum, Marty McFly's place, whatever. It's
Well, it's
weird.
the same thing for me to think. I liken it to like doing a petition or a spell. I would always prefer to write it out, even though it takes time, especially like even when you're inscribing something on a candle, like for candle magic, I would not be a person that would type it up and like affix it, print it and affix it to. I have to write it. It just, to me, has more meaning writing it out in that way too, and that's kind of what it makes me think of.
And can we just add one more piece before we move on? And that is, it is not bad if you do that. It is okay if anybody else can do however they want. As this is just our opinion of how it feels to us. Now, I would recommend, if that's all you have and the capability to do it and you do it and it works for you, you keep doing it. But consider trying it the other ways and see if you like it. It's both ways. I agree. Interestingly, I have this really neat thought and idea through symbols and symbolic things. Sigils especially, I love sigils. So it's kind of neat to me to draw out and or electronically make the sigils and then print them. I don't know why, it just feels neat to do it, but I have to hand draw them first. I can't draw them in the computer first. It's just weird to me. It's like there's a translation issue. I can't translate from my brain directly to the computer screen. I have to use it through my hand and draw first, and then I can translate it to a screen to utilize for whatever. But anywho, I think that's an interesting way to look at it. So I should always write about your shadow. The one big thing I think that she mentions, and it just makes sense, is be honest with yourself. If you feel like you're writing something down and you're like immediately like, no, I don't really believe that or feel that way, then write that too. Don't strike out the original thought. Keep the thoughts going. Be honest with yourself and work it. Be curious about it. Think through it. And then that's going to get us really into the before you begin part, getting the process going.
Oh yeah. Yep. Oh, I had something I wanted to touch on. What did I jump?
I will say the one thing that I marked before you begin part of this chapter is, who is the character you become to save your life?
Yeah.
So I highlighted that because, the only person that can save your life is you. So knowing what do you have to do and what do you have to become in order to reach that level, that is to me, that really is the meaning of life. It's all summarized there. It's, you can't help anybody else before you've helped yourself. You can't feed others if you've never eaten. You can't, you have nothing to pull from. You have no energy. So if your life is not where you want it to be and you need it saved and you need to save part of it, or your ship is drowning, or your ship is sinking and you're about to drown, who's going to save you? What's the perfect savior of your life, and what does that look like? You should contemplate that, and you should contemplate that a lot, because I'm betting it will change over time.
And
Was that it?
Yeah, it was right along with that, and it was that while you're figuring out, who you'll become to save your life. Again, it's about being the unattached undercover observer. And she talks about when you're the observer, you're living the life of the other. That means you're detached, observing your shadow and becoming who you need to be to save yourself. And that's what I had. Yep. I'm glad you helped me remember.
Yeah, no, I think that was just, I almost missed it because the way I had it written. But so before you begin, right? So this is talking about, we're in chapter 3. We've done all the preparation work. We've learned the meditations. We've learned the grounding and centering. We've adapted, Rook and I, our own process of how we do that. What does our chakra meditation look like? For me, that's always a great starting place before I do anything, which is the first time I've ever shared that with you, which is weird because I just assumed that people did that. That's just what was always in my head. We've talked about it before, but I've never actually walked you through it. And I think that was a very neat experience to do, because I've never walked anybody through the way I do it, and it worked. So what do you do before you begin? You do all those things, right? You ground and center. I would start with my breathing exercises just to calm down, but then grounding and center, casting your circle.
Yeah.
Entering and leaving the tarot card, the dark goddess meditation, so meeting the dark goddess. And then, you determine, what do you use? You use candles, incense, magic, things. We made a blend that we shared with Joy when we were making it, which was really cool, to kind of do our thing and help us get that energy going. That's a balance of the elements. And I think it was a 13 blend, if I'm not mistaken. I think we hit 13.
Yeah. It was 13.
Yeah. And, you do this whole pre-work thing, and that's the part I wanted to share, that I think we can share. It's the journal exercise, with not doing anything with the cards yet. We're doing the who are you? Don't censor yourself. Answer the question with an I am. Who's the perfect you?
What do you like about yourself?
What do you like about, yeah.
Dislike?
What do you dislike? What talents do you have? Like I keep telling myself I don't have any.
Why did you select this book?
Why did you select this book? And so we did this part of the working. And I was going to share kind of what some of the things that came up. And this is all before we actually do the draw for the Star of Discovery, which will be a separate thing. But so, who are you? And this is what I wrote immediately after the meditation and the process. Animal lover, confused sometimes, afraid of being confused. I have a huge fear of being dementia when I'm older. I feel strong but weak and weak but strong. I do feel alive. I feel whole and connected, and I feel that I am wanted and I am full. But my perfect self is the sage at the top of the mountain that somebody would go to in order to learn how to learn. I can be creative. So it immediately was positive for me, which is not my normal process. Normally when I ask these questions, I would have started and just stayed pretty confused, upset, get frustrated too easy. I would have listed all the things I hated about myself. So it's really important to look at the notes and say, what do you like? Describe your perfect self. And that brought out things, like I am creative. I want to know my shadow better. Just all those things that kept coming up about things that I have issues with. Like I am afraid to let go. I want to avoid criticism. I want to be perfect. And the things that I do, and when I do them, perfection is a goal of mine. And I am slowly learning that when your goal is perfection, you literally will set yourself up to fail over and over. Because that is a projection of what people expected of me when I was a child. And that is absolutely true. I do not treat my body well. That is my weakest link. I can be manipulative to people. I fear close connections to people outside of my relationship. And no matter how much I've spent time with certain people, it was really, really, really difficult for me to actually trust.
And so I answer the same questions. What's your perfect self? What do you like about yourself? And it's weird, it's hard to say positive things about yourself, and why is that? But it wasn't hard to me when I got started after the meditation. I think that made all the difference. So I like that I'm photogenic. I like my nose and my ears. I put I'm funny and silly.
Photogenic.
I like my smile, sensitivity. My intuition is pretty spot on about people and situations and things. I like that I can be a good listener when people want to talk. I'm a thorough thinker, and I don't hold grudges. I'm pretty quick to forgive or put things behind me. Imperfect self, what do I dislike? The fire self, a lot of times I jump into things at times without thinking them through and take action. Very often take on too many things sometimes and give up or quit on most of them. And don't focus on a single task for long periods of time, but that's actually something I'm working on. And the reason that I wanted to do shadow work was the anxiety from being able to, the inability to focus. And I think I'm doing better.
Get better. A long ways to go. I'm just kidding.
Brian.
Not yet. So, and I think those are all exercises that don't need to be part of shadow work. They can just be done as exercises, You should be aware of who you are and what you don't like and don't like. Listen to yourself, be honest with yourself, and be willing to make those adjustments as you need to, and kind of look at those things. But obviously, it's a good way to start before shadow work. So, we have done our initial star of discovery. We have made those pulls. We are going to talk about that in the next episode. But for this to kind of, I think, round it out and end it out, let's talk about the star of discovery. So it's basically using only the major arcana, right? There's meditation. You pull them all face down, and then you start flipping them over and meditate on each one as you go around. And each location has an important piece or a descriptor that goes along with it. And of course, you always want to write down what you see, and then you leave these cards out on your altar, and you come back to them and see how do you feel about them as you go, and what is your thoughts on them. But if you want to talk a little bit about the specific layout and what each number means.
Yeah. Oh, and it's really nice to leave your cards up, but if you have dogs, make sure you leave them up high where they won't eat or destroy or mess up your...
I already bought an extra deck to cover that one.
Yeah. So, the first position, and again, we're not talking about what our actual cards were yet. We're going to do a separate episode on that. But the first position in the center, number 1, is denial. And it's the idea of it is, what negatives or positives do people tell you about yourself that you have trouble accepting?
I think that's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah.
The second spot, so I'm going to put this up on the screen in the editing section, so if I have time. The position 2, which would be your bottom right, which is the first point of the star on the bottom right, is anxiety. So when do I get nervous and anxious? What things cause me to be upset or uncomfortable? Or I'm most anxious when, like, for me, thinking about travel, my anxiety just in general, my most incredible anxiety is when one part of the plan breaks. I am 10 times more stressful with my first flight than I am with my second flight. I don't know why yet. I am completely de-stressed from all of that when it's a direct flight and I don't have a layover. Layovers are extremely stressful for me. Extremely. Even if there's 3 hours between them, I have to have like 3 or 4 hours layover between them. But anyway, anxiety. I got off top there. But so you're most anxious when, and you're going to write about that, and you're going to see how the entering and Xing that tarot card is going to tell you about your anxiety.
Well, hello.
That's number 3. Tell us about number 3, VG.
VG says number 3, which is in the top right of the Star of Discovery, is inferiority. When do you most lack confidence?
Never. She is the most confident dog I have ever met. So, I think inferiority, and with the question of when do I most lack confidence, is where you'll discover your area of inferiority. I think that's going to be the hardest one for me, because I put everything into my inferiority complex. And I do think my family, my growing up has a lot to do with it. My parents, whatever. There was one parent. I have 3 parents basically, but there was one of the 3 that raised me that I do not, that I feel had an impact on my inferiority issues, and an uncle that had a significant impact on my inferiority issues. So that's going to be a tough spot for me. And I believe, well, I don't want to even say what card it is. I know which one it is, and I can tell you it's all about forgiving myself. But we'll get there. So inferiority, that was a good one. What's next?
Number 4. What's number 4?
Anger.
Anger.
This is also going to be a big one for me. What qualities in a person do I most dislike or have the most difficulty dealing with? The answer is the key to discovering your anger or rage. Anger's fear in disguise. Yeah. I had extreme anger issues as a child. I was in therapy for it. I worked through it very well at that point. And it came back. And it still comes back. So anger is a big one. Not blaming. That's another important part about anger is we're not talking about blaming anybody. We're not talking about trying to fix anything. We're just, remember, discovery. This is observation. Write it down.
Number
Anger. No, I'm just kidding.
What about it? What up? Number 5, secrecy in the top left of the star. And it's what do I rarely talk about with others? What are my secrets and my family secrets? What do you fear people will find out about you? And boy, do a lot of us spend a lot of time to try to and worry and thought about how to hide some things from others. When if we shared with trusted people, we'll probably see that everybody's got secrets, things that they're unshamed of, whether it's justified or not. Hey, Beachy! That's Beachy Light. Shucker.
She came over. I think secrecy is going to be an interesting one for me because I'm sure I have secrets, things that are secret that I have not shared maybe with other people, but I don't really feel like I've got a whole lot of secrets like in my skeleton closet that I'm afraid of sharing. So it's going to be interesting to see how that one kind of pulls out for me. They're secrets. Of course, everybody has some secrets. Finn just took the Maz blanket off. He takes it off and throws it on the floor so that he can use it to sleep on. But anyway, so it's going to be interesting to see that because I think most of my secrets are just things that I might have felt that I am not comfortable telling people that I feel. You know what I mean? So maybe my secrets are my true feelings about some things. I don't know. So that's going to be an interesting learning experience for me. And then our last one is also one that I'm very, very not good with is self-loathing. The most devastating shadow of all. If you cannot love and honor ourselves, we cannot realize our higher potential. The first step towards self-forgiveness is discovering where your self-hatred lies. I think I know where my self-hatred lies, but I also wonder how much of that is where I want it to lie versus where it might actually be. So hopefully we'll learn. We'll learn as part of this process, what it is and what happens. And we've pulled these already, so we'll be sharing that on our next episode. And we're going to go through the Star of Discovery on our couple of our meditations and what we've learned about ourselves and how we've worked the process, how we've meditated on them and how we enter and exit those cards and how we've left them, worked with them, because we do leave them on the shadow for a while, on the altar for a while. And we'll be coming back to those. Recording, writing, whatever we feel as we work through it. I'm obviously working through a little bit slower because I'm gone during the week, so I don't have them. And I have a picture of them, and it just didn't feel right. Like it didn't work. I want to be here when I do it, so that's coming.
Yep.
Now, the rest of the chapter really is about just other activities you can do. It's about keeping balance. It's about accepting an integration. It's about music. It's about allowance, watching the sunrise, watching a sunset, those kind of things that are all part of that shadow balance. And I'm telling you, for me, that it has been music, and it has been writing, and it has been reading. Reading that book on polyvagal theory has been immensely helpful. Reading one of my occult sciences book, immensely helpful. Listening to a couple of podcasts on neuroscience, neurocognitive stuff, Jungian psychology, and even just listening to planetarium music has been just immensely helpful in this shadow work so far. And when we start to share our personal opinions, final thought here for me, on our personal journeys and what we're doing with this first Star of Discovery, it has been one of, if not the most helpful thing I've done. Like even to this point, just 50 pages into the book, and into the first episode, tarot pool, I feel more whole than I think I have felt in a very long time. And it's just looking at it. All we're doing right now is observing. And I'm comfortable observing. It feels good to observe and say, I don't really like when I do that. I need to work on that. And then to actually work on it is like, it's very empowering.
Oh yeah.
Final thoughts?
Hey Finn. Well, my final thoughts. It has been, and there can also be medical and chemical reasons that you feel and do things. So if that's the case, by all means, please get the medical solution, the chemical solution, if it's psych, if it's counseling, if it's medication. But I recommend, like I've done, it's a well-rounded approach. Do the shadow work, do meditation if that helps you run. Like in the book, the part about music was so cool. It said for shadow work, find some sad, downtrodden sounding music, whether it's country or classical, some sad violins. That's stuff that helps you work through it. You might need to add a little more activity in your life, but do things that you like doing. Get a massage, go for a walk, read, do all that stuff. But it has definitely helped me a lot, doing this shadow work with the reason that I wanted to do it. Anxiety from being unable to focus. And so I think we'll definitely go into more specifics and share about our first pull for the Star Discovery in the next episode.
I think we need to get him a binky.
Oh, hey Finn, I'll get him one.
He's looking around wondering where you're talking from because he hears you through the headphones.
Hey Finn, you want a binky, bud?
He's such a
You're
baby.
handsome.
So that is it for this episode. And we will be, if you're watching this is going to be one of the first episodes we've done and then run right into production and editing so that we can get it out to you quickly and get this information out there. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you've learned something. And, this is definitely an eye-opening experience. If you have your own methods and ways of doing it, it's an ongoing for life situation, right? We always will be doing shadow work, but the intentionality of this has made a difference. So with that, I am Salann, and I am signing off from one half of the Two Pondering Pagans.
And I am Rook. Thanks for joining us. Please share about your own experiences with meditation, shadow work, or if you are reading the book along with us.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks. Hi, and welcome to... I'm just kidding. We're not doing
Wow, we're putting that at the end. That's the...
that. No. Yeah, that medicine's working. You pause, and I like it.
Yeah.
I'll have to keep that up.
Oh, it's much better than Sunday's attempt.
Oh, I bet. All right.